I had a dream about you, Corny. So, this is a corn cookie, and it is one of the most delicious cookies I ever had. And it just so happens that there's a place very nearby to where we shoot the podcast, here at Vincenzo Salvatore Cakes, and that serves these cookies that are just delicious. And so I figured I'd sit back, relax, have a cookie, and tell you about our guest today. Why did I sing I Have a Dream? Everything that you see on this podcast is intentional. Because today, Stephen Cole's on the show. Stephen Cole is a lyricist, book writer, and I mean multiple book writer, because he's written novels, memoirs, and books of musicals. Okay? You thought I wasn't going to take another bite. But I am. Stephen Cole recently wrote a book called Mary and Ethel and Mikey Who? It came out last year, and it's essentially about a boy named Mikey who's a Broadway star. You're hearing me chew right now, but just you'll get over it. It's essentially about just listen to it on 1.75 speed if I'm speaking too slow for you. But it's essentially about Mikey, who's a Broadway aficionado, and he is obsessed with Ethel Merman. And he finds out that Ethel is dying of a brain tumor, and so he goes to finally get the chance to meet her. And now, Stephen Cole had a relationship this is what I should mention. In going to meet her, he wound up also meeting Mary Martin, right? Another Broadway legend. And in doing so, he winds up getting caught up in the space-time continuum, which sends him back in time to meet some great... Oh my gosh. Wow. Gosh, this is why you shouldn't eat and do an intro, huh? And so he winds up going back in time to meet Cole Porter and a bunch of other Broadway heroes. That book is written, first of all, it's a blast, and it's a historical fiction novel, and it's written by Stephen Cole. He also has written over a dozen musicals, okay? One of which is the first ever American musical to premiere in the Middle East already more than 20 years ago. Another one was After the Fair, which premiered at the York Theater Off Broadway and starred our first guest and our dearest godmother of the pod, After the Fair. So we get to, that After the Fair is the musical. It starred our dearest godmother, Michelle Pock. After the Fair in 1999. And there's plenty of musicals after that. He wrote a musical adaptation of the famous movie, The Night of the Hunter. And Night of the Hunter has been in the works for 20 plus years. And now it's getting another run, another production, which is really exciting. And he also gets to talking about his one-man show, Camilton, which by the time you guys see this will have premiered a couple weeks prior in New York City, and then is looking to, go to London and Edinburgh Fringe and, have many other iterations. So he's working constantly, nonstop. Notably, he got to premiere an original musical called Casper, about Casper the Friendly Ghost, starring Chita Rivera, okay? And he also tells us a story about how he met Dick Van Dyke, which just made me, buzz out of excitement. Plus the relationship that he actually had with Ethel Merman, which was a beautiful relationship in the last couple of years of her life, and the the times that he got to meet Sheldon Harnick and John Kander, who were able to give him advice as a musical theater writer, as well as gosh, the list goes on and on. I don't even know where to start, but he's had multiple people. Mary Martin, he got to, so the book, funny enough, Mary and Ethel, I'm ranting here, but Mary and Ethel and Mikey Who, the book has a lot of truths in it, which is something I really appreciated. And I wanted to make sure we had him on the show to talk about all of these things, because there's a lot of really fascinating stories, and I think you'll get a lot out of it because so much of it is so interesting. And I really enjoyed this episode. I think he's funny. I think you'll really get a kick out of him the way I'm getting a kick out of this cookie. And let's get to it. I want to introduce you to Stephen Cole. Stephen Cole's I Want to Be Like You. I wanna 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 be like you. Welcome to another episode of I Want to Be Like You with Elbi Cespedes. I want to introduce everyone to Stephen Cole. Stephen Cole, thank you for joining us.
I'm so glad to be here.
Yeah, I'm glad you're here, and we have plenty to talk about. So this should be a treat. So we start the podcast with the same question every time, and it is, who was your I Want to Be Like You when you were a kid?
Oh, gosh. Well, it was probably Noel Coward because he did everything.
Yeah.
He was a playwright. He was a songwriter. He performed. He directed. He produced.
Yeah.
He was in movies. He was on stage. And so that was one of my idols. Absolutely. And he was the subject of the first book I wrote.
Right. And he was also, I didn't realize that he was an actor. Like, I didn't realize that he...
Oh, yeah. He was an actor, a singer, a dancer. So he wrote a lot of his plays for himself.
Yeah.
When he was young, he was in all of his plays with Gertrude Lawrence and musicals. Right. And so he did it all.
Yeah, and it's funny because you look at somebody like a Lin-Manuel Miranda or Sarah Bareilles right now who do all that stuff too, you know. My association with Noel Coward was that I was in a musical theater history class, and it was around the midterms or finals where we were expected to read a bulk of the book, and some of it we hadn't formally learned about in class, and Noel Coward was one of those things. So the only question I got wrong was, who is Noel Coward? And so from then on, I will never forget who Noel Coward is.
Absolutely. You should have had my book.
Yeah, right, it's true. I should have had your memoir.
Well, the book about Noel Coward was called a biography.
Right.
So it had every fact of his career in there.
Right.
And in fact, there's an Noel Coward estate in London that handles everything. Oh. And I went to visit them, and it was sitting on their shelf.
No way.
And that was really exciting.
Wow,
yeah,
that's pretty cool.
Use it as reference.
Well, I guess I should ask, in terms of these, like, you know, because you wrote the Noel Coward memoir, but you also wrote a memoir about Charles Strous's life.
Well, I ghosted his book, yes,
yeah.
Which was called Put on a Happy Face. You know what ghosting is. You know, basically.
Like, yes, but explain.
All right, so before I ghosted his book, I ghosted another book which was about Marni Nixon, who was the most famous ghost singer of Hollywood, who sang all the songs from My Fair Lady and West Side Story. But she made sure that I got credit on the book because she never got credit. So I not only got paid, but I got credit, and we became great friends. But then that book went really well, so an agent brought me up to do Charles Strous's book, but I don't get credit on that book. So I just took the money and ran out the door. But I'm really proud of the book. And basically, when you're a ghostwriter, as Marni used to say, well, you're the writer, but I'm the author. So it's their life, it's their stories, but you make it look like a book. And you have to write in their voice.
Wow.
And so Strous's was interesting and fun to do. And I got to invent certain aspects, literary aspects, to make it work really well.
Well, I was going to ask, how much in the research of these books does it... because it's like, for example, calling it a biobibliography, right? It's like, when I think of bibliography, all I think about is all these long lists of citations.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I guess...
So that first book, it was like that. I went to the Lincoln Center Library, and I got every clipping file that they had, which were crumbling pieces of paper. And I made sure to get every fact I could get in there.
Right.
And still do a little writing, but mostly it's facts. That was that book.
Right.
The other books had to read like narrative. They had to read like books. Yeah. So you have facts in them, but they have to feel like stories, especially if it's somebody's story about their life.
Between a biobibliography.
Exactly. A biography or a memoir has to feel, I think it should feel like a novel, that you want to know what's going to happen, what happens next, and where are we going.
Right, interesting.
So those were interesting to write.
I was going to ask you about, well, actually, I should just mention this little anecdote about Lincoln Center Public Library, because I went there once on a research paper, and I was doing research on Hal Prince and his time during Evita. And all you would type in is like keywords, and you would say, like, you know, I'm looking for Hal Prince, and you would type in Evita, and all of a sudden I was waiting there for a minute, and I'm going, oh, you know, what am I waiting for? I'm like, oh, you know, and then all of a sudden I get presented with books upon books of, like, not books, but, you know, binders and stacks upon stacks of faxes and all of these things about, you know,
I know.
It's amazing what the resources.
It is amazing. And I did the same thing with Charles. I mean, with Charles Strous's book, I had a basis because he had written things down the same way Marni did, but I still had to do research to get the facts right. The thing that you learn about people who are writing their own memoirs is that they don't really remember. They remember the stories that they've been telling on talk shows, and they don't necessarily remember the true facts. And I would say things like, "Well, that didn't happen then. This happened then," and I have the proof.
I honestly learned that sometimes even doing the podcast, I'll research people, and then I'll ask them if I'll be like, "Oh, so it was around like 2006 where you did something," and I'm like, "No, I think it was around 2010," and I was like, "That's a big difference." I think and then I start to question my own research a little bit.
I know. But oh no, not everybody remembers everything about their own life.
Yeah, it's funny. It's funny. So, are you from the city originally?
I am a native New Yorker.
Wow, where are you from?
In Brooklyn.
Where in Brooklyn?
Way out in Canarsie.
Wow,
where they bury the bodies.
We're from Coney Island.
Oh yeah, I love Coney Island. I go out to Brighton Beach all the time.
Yeah, that's where we're from. Brighton Beach, Coney Island.
Brighton.
Yeah,
and that's my summer place.
Yeah, right. Of course, yeah. That's where I was born and raised.
And as soon as I got out of home, I moved to Manhattan and been here ever since.
Were you a born and bred theater kid?
Yeah, I think I was. I was a theater kid in that my mother took me to the theater all the time. So I went to Saturday matinees and I saw great shows from 7 on. And so by doing that, it made me want to do it. Yeah. And so I did my first performing at 14. Wow. Professionally, I did summer stock.
Wow.
And I was an apprentice, and I did it at 15 and 16 and 17. And then I started to work as an actor until I stopped looking like 12 years old. And then my career was over.
Wow, that's funny. So you were working as a child actor?
I was working as a child. And I was a child until like I was 20, 21. And then it was done. And I went, okay, you've got to pivot. That's today's word, right? A pivot. And I did. And I went right back to writing because I wrote my first musical when I was 15. Really? And had it produced at Brooklyn College.
Oh my gosh. So how did you know that you wanted to write? Like,
just came out of, I don't know, I wanted to create. But I'll tell you a funny story. You know who Charles Bush is, right?
Yes.
Charles Bush, famous. Well, we were in summer stock together when I was 14.
Is that
right?
And
he and his friend Andy Halliday, who was also in many of his shows, they had written a musical. They were older than I was. Charles won't like that I said that. and I thought, well, if they can write a musical, I can write a musical. Right. And I went home and I did it.
Wow.
I just sat down and started to write. And found a collaborator, and we started writing songs. And it was all for fun at first. Yeah. Until he went to Brooklyn College and said, we can do our show. And so we did it. And because I had done 3 years of summer stock, I figured I could do anything. I directed it. I choreographed it. I was in it. I sold lemonade in the lobby.
But I should ask you, I've heard you say before in former interviews that like a big part of what you think that people going into writing a musical should retain or know at the very least is the history that preceded.
Totally.
And that's
what I did.
I was going to say, how much of that did you know at that young age?
I knew everything.
Did you?
And what I didn't know, I just kept learning. To this day, I'm a student of it all. But I really think you need to know the past 100 years of how musical theater developed, what it was, what it is, and especially the greatest shows. If you can if I emulated Cole Porter when I started out, well, what did I know? I knew that if I dissected his lyrics, I would find out why they're so brilliant. Right. And then if I could copy that, and that's what I did, I could learn from that. There was no school to go to learn how to write lyrics, perfect rhymes and things like that. So I learned from these great, great shows. And I think the history is so important. Yeah. I think it's for anybody in show business needs to know their history.
Yeah, I think so too.
You when you walk into an audition, if you're an actor and they say, Chita Rivera, and they don't know who Chita Rivera is. Well, I'm finished.
Yeah. It is. There's a square one thing.
Yeah, and so I really think that's very, very important for anybody in show business.
Yeah, I think so too. What was your first Broadway show? Do you remember?
That I saw? Oh, yeah. Of course I do. It was Hello, Dolly, the original run. Okay, I'm really dating myself. Starring Betty Grable. Oh, the great movie star who had the $1 million legs, And my mother paid $3 whole for us to get in. $3 tickets in the last row of the balcony.
I think you can't even buy candy for $3 right now.
It changed my life. I saw live people, and I knew that they were applauding for me.
Yeah.
And I came out of there, and I just knew that's what I wanted to do. Oh. And so Hello Dolly did it, and wow. And then I was lucky enough to live through the whole Sondheim era, to see all the original productions.
Oh my gosh.
And there is an advantage to being older. And so I learned every time I went to the theater, I came out wanting to write a show.
Yeah.
Because I thought, when I saw Company and Follies and A Little Night Music, I said, that's what I want to do. I want that to happen.
Right.
And so it was, at that point, it was still performing, but I also knew I wanted to emulate what they were doing up there.
Right.
Because it was so exciting.
Yeah, for sure. At that point in Hello Dolly, was Leroy still in Cornelius?
No, I think this is before his time.
Oh, is that right?
This is before his time. The first time I saw Leroy Reams was in Oklahoma. He did it at Lincoln Center.
Yes, of course,
and that was the first time I saw him. And then, of course, Applause and things like that later on. But he wasn't in he wasn't in the original run of Dolly. He did it later on with Channing, and then directed her, and then he played the role.
Yes,
he did everything.
He's really done it all.
Amazing.
Yeah, and
but
he was Will in that production.
He's not as old. He's not as old as that.
Yes, right. Okay, yeah, I didn't think so, but I had wondered about that.
Yeah.
What was I going to ask you in terms of it's funny because we talk about this all the time. Is like we're big Sondheim geeks, but I think we became bigger Sondheim geeks after he passed.
Interesting.
And I think that's happened to a lot of people. Is like they've become more engaged in his work since his past. I mean, I know that's the case because when you tried to buy the Sondheim Finishing the Hat books after he passed, they were
is that
on back order.
You
couldn't
I
buy
couldn't
them.
wait till as soon as it came out.
yeah, you couldn't buy them at the time. And
wow.
'cause I remember I was trying to get somebody a Christmas gift, and on Amazon it was on back order. You couldn't even. But what I was saying in regards to this is that since he's passed, I think that there's this. He's become that much more of like a legend, right?
Yeah.
And the majority of my life, he will be passed so that people will look at him. It's like Lin-Manuel Miranda. I remember posting this thing about how like he will be deemed as like a Shakespeare, except he was alive, he was here in a time that a lot of people can remember. Did you ever meet him?
You know what? I kind of met Sondheim. I was in the ASCAP workshop with one of my shows, and he showed up always once a term to see somebody's work, but he wasn't there to see my work. And so it was an almost thing. But I've always, at the time, I was a little scared of him.
Yeah.
It was, he wrote that he was God, you know, in a funny way. And that's how I thought of him. I had other mentors like Sheldon Harnick and John Kander, and they knew my work, and they would critique me, but I was terrified to let Sondheim ever do it.
How did you get it? How did you get involved with Harnick and
Kander?
Through
my collaborators. I've written with some great collaborators, and they worked with those people on Broadway. And so with Sheldon, my first show, Dodsworth, which was produced in Fort Worth, Texas. All my shows are produced in Texas. He just said, come on up and sing some of your stuff for me. And we sang an opening number that was maybe 20 minutes long. It was such a long opening number. And he said, you're making me work too hard. And it was the best criticism I ever got. And I threw that number away and wrote a whole new song. But he was really so sweet about it. Yeah. And Kander, I worked with Kander's husband on many, many Drama League award things.
Very cool.
And so anytime I wrote special material, he would hear it first, and he would always praise me. And he wrote one of the letters of recommendation for when I won the Kleban Award for The Night of the Hunter. And I remember when I asked him to write it, and he said, well, anytime I write a letter of recommendation, nobody wins. But I won.
That's awesome. That's great.
So that was really great. But he was always, I could just email or pick up the phone. And he's still with us, which is so fantastic.
It's amazing. It's amazing. And still writing.
And in great shape.
Yeah, in great shape and still writing, which is amazing. Like I will say, like New York, I thought had this beautiful sweeping score, and those transition songs in particular were just stunning. And it shows that even 96, he's still
absolutely. I think it's 98 now.
90. Oh right,
Yeah,
I
now
think
he's
he was 96.
We don't know.
When he wrote
We don't know if we're going to get another one, but I bet he's writing something.
I'm sure
There's
he
something.
is. I'm sure he is.
going
And I
on
feel
there.
similarly. We talked about it on the podcast plenty of times, but I feel very similarly about Here We Are. When I saw Sometimes Here We Are, I thought that was a really strong piece for what it's worth.
Amazing.
The writing in that
Yeah,
piece was actually
yeah.
still held true
Absolutely.
to the work that he's always been doing. So what was the first production? Was After the Fair the first production that you got produced in New York?
Yeah, Off Broadway.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because it came once again from Irving, Texas, where it won a bunch of awards, and then it went to Chicago, and then Off Broadway was the first one.
Yeah.
At the York Theater.
How exciting of a moment is that? I mean,
It was a very exciting moment.
Yeah.
But it's interesting, the 90s, because my first show was produced in 95, and that was Dodsworth in Texas, and then Grow Singers, and then After the Fair. But things were easier. I have to say it was easier to get shows on.
Yeah.
I literally ran into the great Jim Morgan, who was running the York Theater then.
Of course, yeah.
At the Plaza Hotel at one of my Drama League benefits, and I said, "Hey, you should do my show After the Fair." And he said, "Send it over." And it was almost that easy.
Wow.
And now you can't get through a door.
Yeah.
And it's not the same thing.
It's hard to
anymore.
reach.
It's much harder.
And
the
hard to
competition is worse. Prices are worse.
Yeah.
In those days, it was just a lot easier. And we had a great director who had done it in Chicago, and we had all these wonderful people, and we had a great Broadway cast in an off-Broadway show.
Right.
And it went extremely well, and then went to London, and it was
So,
really great.
what you talk about, like, particularly in terms of Dodsworth, because you said that was the first show that you got produced.
Yeah.
What did it take to get that show produced at the time?
I had a weird idea. I met a director, and he happened to have been Tommy Toon's associate director on Broadway. And so he wanted to break out from being that and be his own person. So I said, why don't you take my show to regional theaters around the country and tell them it won't be expensive. It'll cost as much as doing Oklahoma. And he did. And the first theater bit, and that was in Fort Worth, Texas.
Wow.
And he had worked there before. His name was Bruce Lumpkin. I don't want to leave out his name.
Yeah.
And he got them interested in the show. And
Wow.
they said, we'll do it. And it was a big, huge Broadway type show.
Was it?
And the first thing that the producer said to me is, well, how am I going to sell tickets? And I went, get a star. And he did. And he got Hal Linden, who's still with us today in his 90s. He was on Barney Miller on TV, won the Tony for the Rothschilds. And Hal, getting involved with the show, brought a bunch of other Broadway people. Dee Hoty was in it, who was brilliant.
Yeah.
And some local people who were fabulous from Texas. And it was, I look back on it now, it was a miracle.
Yeah.
And what an experience to be at every rehearsal, make changes every day. Hal Linden was not easy to work with because he knew exactly what he wanted. And if a line wasn't right for him, you changed that line. If the song wasn't right, you rewrote the song.
Yeah.
And so I learned that. I also learned how do you deal with stars. You become a tailor. You know what? You are tailoring your material, sewing it, and making sure it fits them perfectly. That's what you do with a star.
Interesting.
You have to show them off as well as show yourself off.
Right.
And so your ego goes from here to here to here and has to go down. So it was a wonderful experience with my collaborator, Jeff Saver, and Bruce as the director.
Yeah.
And just being thrown into the professional world where I had never been as a writer before.
Yeah.
And
was Jeff your first collaborator?
No, I had two collaborators at first. I decided to, my actual first collaborator was when I was in high school.
Okay.
And that was Alan Matlick, and we wrote that first show, Everything's Fine, which was produced at Brooklyn College, and then at a theater called Ryan Rep in Brooklyn.
Oh, very cool.
And they did it twice. And then I found Jeff was the first, and Matthew Ward. At the same time,
Yes.
we were writing two shows.
Oh, fun.
After the Fair and Dodsworth. And I did that because I was faster than they were.
Oh.
And so when they were off doing another show, they were musical directors and
Yeah.
conducting on Broadway or on the road. I would be writing one show or the other.
Oh,
and
I
so
see.
Dodsworth got on first, and then After the Fair got on second, just down the road in Texas.
Wow, that's funny.
I know.
Yeah. So, if I'm right about this, we mentioned the Noel Coward memoir. But if I'm right about that, that was before or after the fair, right? That you had
I
done that?
think so. I'm not sure about the chronology.
Yeah. How did that come to you?
That came to me, a friend of a friend. He was an editor.
Yeah.
And he was doing a series of books for Greenwood Press. And he said, I'm doing these bio-bibliographies, and who would you like to do? And I had never written a whole book before. And I said, well, either Betty Hutton or Noel Coward. And because it was movie stars a lot. And of course he said Noel Coward would be a little more sophisticated. And so I just dove in, and it was a labor of love. There was no money. And I just worked on it and worked on it. And then when that came out, he moved to another publisher, and he asked me to do another book, and that was that book about that girl. Because he was doing a series of TV shows. And so I knew Marlo, and I had worked with Marlo Thomas. And so I thought, well, that's the obvious one to do.
Yeah.
And so I did that. So that's how that came about and got me into the book writing world. I never even dreamed about doing that. But it's interesting because Noel Coward also wrote novels and memoirs and all of that at the same time as he did all those plays and musicals.
Yeah, well, to the point that we had earlier is like you said that you got to go to the estate in London and that they had the book there. And I was going to ask you, how much did you receive from the estate in terms of...
They were very, very helpful then.
Yeah.
In fact, when I started writing that book, Noel Coward's lover was still alive.
Oh, is that right?
Noel was gone in the 70s, but Graham Payne wrote to me, and his manager here in New York sent me material. So everyone was very, very open about helping me do that.
Yeah, that's great.
And it was really great.
How long did it take you to write?
I don't know, maybe a year.
Yeah.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, that's
I was
interesting.
under no major deadline, and I just kept working on it. And
Did you feel inspired, right? After having, because when we had Rob actually in here and talked about, because he had just accomplished his first book, and so I'd asked him, I was like, did you feel like a huge sigh of relief having finished this like huge accomplishment? He said he felt like he could finally have a drink, and like just to like.
It's a wonderful feeling to hold an actual book in your hands and that kind of thing. But then you're moving on.
Did you feel the interest to write more like immediately?
No, because I was writing musicals,
right?
And so that was really my pathway.
Yeah.
And so and I was happy when Marlowe's book came up. That was great. And then nothing really came up until Marni Nixon, I think. And but Marni changed me a lot.
Yeah.
Because it's such a wonderful book, and her life was so fabulous. And working very closely with her for 2 years on it, at the same time as I was writing other shows.
Oh, wow.
So
it's funny. So like we should talk about this. And this was until almost a decade later. You wrote like you mentioned, you ghost wrote the ghost wrote the Charles Strouse piece.
That was later.
Yeah.
Right.
This was you wrote Marni Nixon's memoir, and I want to tell you guys, because I don't know if I got to tell you this, but Marni Nixon, like he mentioned, was she was a ghost singer for Audrey Hepburn in My Fair Lady, which is nuts. And then The King and I, Deborah Carr,
and Natalie Wood in West Side Story, and also a little bit of Marilyn Monroe in Jennifer Blonde.
Oh, no way!
She does all her high notes.
That's crazy.
Yes. So that's what she was famous for, but also it was a big secret.
Right.
And so
How
the book
ironic.
was ironic, but she was on Broadway, she did opera, she sang with Leonard Bernstein and Stravinsky, and she was an amazing talent. And
how did that come to you?
And she had sung my songs first. So I knew her as a singer, and she knew me as a writer. We were doing a concert at the Donnell Library, and they do these tributes to songwriters, and I got one of them. And so I brought along all my composers that I was working with them, Matthew Ward and Jeff Saver and Clay Richardson, who we should talk about, and we were doing new songs from my shows that hadn't even gotten on yet. I hadn't even gotten Dodsworth on, and she sang in a quartet, Marni, with Ron Raines and Mary Beth Peale and George Lee Andrews, and she was so brilliant.
Oh my gosh.
And so when we did the reading of Dodsworth, I gave her a role in that. Wow. And she did that. And then years went by, and I knew that this book was happening, and my agent brought me in to possibly be her ghost. And she turned me down. And she turned me down because she wanted a woman to do it. And she got a woman to do it, and she fired her. Then she got a second woman to do it, and she fired her. And then we ran into each other. She was at an audition, and I said, "What happened to your book?" And she said, "I need you now." And so suddenly it was okay that I was not a woman. She thought that telling certain things would be better to have a woman.
The lens,
But it was just fine.
Nice.
We had a great... So that's how that all happened.
Yeah.
And I wanted to do it very badly because I knew her story was so interesting. And I also knew it would be a learning curve for me. I had to learn about opera and classical music that I didn't know anything about. But every day that I walked into her apartment to interview her, just like you, I had to research everything so that I didn't look like a boob.
Yeah,
Because she did not suffer fools gladly.
Right.
If you said, what were you really in The King and I to her? So she was out of there. You had to know her life, and I knew her life.
And understandably so.
Yeah.
I think that the value of research is actually really important. There are times where although I don't listen to many anymore, like in terms of like I'll listen to a podcast and I will see sometimes the person who's facilitating the interview or the conversation not you can tell that they're a little bit less phased than the person's material, and it just becomes less interesting to listen to because then the person who's being interviewed is having to explain their life to it, and it just feels not as thought out.
I agree.
Yeah. What did you mention though that she had done with Mary Beth Peil and George Lee Andrews?
Oh, so that was a quartet from my show, Dodsworth.
Oh, no way.
So we had just written it. And the interesting thing was all these great singers are all in Marni's apartment to rehearse with Jeff Saver at the piano. And they're all toughing it out. It was a four-part counterpoint fugue type thing, very difficult. Wow. And they were all toughing it out. She is the most brilliant sight singer. So she just sang her line, "What's the matter with the rest of you?"
Oh my gosh.
She just knew everything.
That's so funny.
She had sung when she was a teenager. Yeah. Stravinsky would have her over to learn things, and she would just sight read. She had perfect pitch. She was incredible.
Yeah, it's absolutely.
And so I had to. She was so smart that I had to be very
on your
smart
ball. Yeah,
on that ball.
It's funny. So I went to college. I was in the same class as George Lee Andrews' granddaughter, Harper.
Oh, wow. So who's his mother? Is that...
You mean Harper's mother?
Yes.
Yeah, Harper's
mother.
Oh gosh, I'm blanking on her name.
God, because I worked with her, probably. She was in After the Fair.
Yeah. Was she really?
Jennifer Lee Andrews.
Yes.
Is it Jennifer?
Yes.
Okay,
I think that's
Jennifer
right. I think that's right.
Jennifer did most of my readings and workshops
as
Anna the maid. If it's Jennifer.
Yeah,
but she was right. But that's George's daughter.
Yeah, and so George's granddaughter Harper was in my college class.
And George was our original Sam Dodsworth before Hal Linden did it. And then George was in The Night of the Hunter for me, the workshop, and he's a wonderful guy. He and his wife. Oh, they're both wonderful.
If I'm right about this, George
and Jennifer was the most talented.
She's a beautiful voice.
Yeah.
And so does Harper. I mean,
I think that's it.
Yeah. Did you find it, Chris? Jennifer Lee Andrews? I feel like we're right about that, but because Harper has a very similar voice to her mom.
She had a lovely voice, Jennifer, and she was a wonderful Anna the maid, because basically After the Fair is about the Victorian English lady and her and the illiterate maid. Yeah. And Anna is a great part. And she has a lot to sing, and so really the two women, they're one half each of the perfect woman. One can't read or write, and the other one has the sexual allure, and so it's
funny. If I'm right about this, just for the record, for note's sake, George was the original Fred in Little Night Music.
Oh yes,
yeah. You heard that?
I saw him on Broadway.
Oh, did you really?
Oh yes.
Yeah, I know he did Phantom for years and years and years too. Yeah. But yeah, he was the original Fred.
I think he's in the Guinness.
Okay.
See that? It's Jennifer. Great.
Yeah, that was God speaking.
Well, I love Jennifer so much. And I just got back in touch with her somewhere on
is that right?
Facebook or something.
Oh, that's nice.
But she was always my ideal. And then yet when we did the show, she wasn't in it. But she did workshops and everything
very
like that.
Cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. I want to talk a little bit about Night of the Hunter because so you guys had your world premiere in San Francisco. Yes. Right? And this was the early 2000s. Tell me a little bit about the show and how that came about.
Right. So it came about because of Clabe Richardson. Now, if you don't know who Clabe Richardson is, I will give you a little history. The Grass Harp, which is one of the biggest cult musical that ran 1 week on Broadway in the 70s, and they recorded it with Barbara Cook and Karen Morrow and Carol Bryce, one of the most wonderful casts.
Yeah.
And the recording turned it into a cult show. And I knew that recording my whole life. And I one day said, I want to write a show with this guy. He's still alive. And so I went into the Manhattan phone book and found him. Because how many Claibe, Claibe Richardsons do you think there were? There was one on the Upper West Side. And I called him up, and he had a lovely Southern accent. He was from Louisiana. And he said, sure, come on up, let's talk. And I went in and I said, oh my God, The Grass Harp is so beautiful, such a gorgeous show. And he loved me immediately. And I wanted him to write Time After Time with me, which wound up being written by Jeff Saber later.
Yeah.
And he said, well, I'll give it a try. I'm really retired. He was 25 years older than me. And we wrote one song together. And it was so beautiful. His music was so exquisite that he said, but I don't want to do that show. He said, because you're going to need contemporary music because it's a time travel piece, and I don't do that. And so I said, okay. And we just sat down on his couch for weeks and weeks thinking, what should we do? What are we going to write together? And we couldn't find anything. And then he came over one day and showed me a video of the movie of The Night of the Hunter starring Robert Mitchum and Shelley Winters. And I...
You've seen it?
It's really,
Oh, it's an incredible movie. It's one of the 100 greatest movies yeah. And it's directed by Charles Lawton. It's his only directorial thing. And I watched this movie, which is a thriller and scary as hell. And I said, a musical of this?
Well, if I'm not mistaken, you may know more about this. It was because of the time it was in the 50s, he had not wanted to direct anymore because it was a flop.
Correct. It was a flop. It did not make money, but now it is
so risky.
hailed. It's amazing. It was hailed. But it's a thriller. It's scary.
Yeah.
But then I went and I found the novel that it was based on by Davis Grubb, and I read the book. And the book had the kind of poetic language that Truman Capote had been using in the 50s. It was a Southern Gothic piece, and it was really about these two little children running away from this preacher who had killed their mother. And so once I read the book, and I literally underlined things in the book, I said, there's a lyric, there's a lyric, there's a lyric. And we got the rights to the novel.
Wow.
From Davis Grubb's brother, who also still lived on the Upper West Side, who I also looked up in the telephone book. Nowadays we would just Google it, but we looked him up. And he knew The Grass Harp. He listened to After the Fair, my CD, always get a CD made. And he said, you guys are great. I'll give it to you. And he gave us the rights.
So how does the process for something like that go? I mean, do you have to pay him for the rights?
Yes, a lawyer's got involved.
Right.
And so you have a contract, you pay for the first year, you have an option to get it for more. You have a contract that goes on. And eventually, rights merge so that the underlying rights for that novel have merged with the musical, so it's always going to be my musical. But sometimes they don't. Sometimes the rights go right back to the original people, but you pay that money. I did it with Dodsworth already, and I did it with Time After Time, so I knew how to do it. I had a lawyer, they had a lawyer, we had those contracts, but because we were doing it on a personal basis with the brother of the author, because he was dead already, we had a great relationship. And so we started to write the show, and we began. And before we even wrote anything, we got an NEA grant. In those days, they gave out grants to authors still.
Oh, wow.
And we got a grant to write the show because it seemed like an important piece.
Right.
And it was. And we started to write it, and we were writing two shows at the same time. It was kind of my thing. And the other show that I was still writing with Claibe was a show called Grosingers about the Catskill Mountains and the Borscht Belt. Complete opposite. So we're writing one Jewish show and one show about the River Jesus at the same time. He was the Southern Baptist, and I was the Jewish guy from Brooklyn. So we kind of switched off.
That's funny.
And once again, you don't know which one's going to get on first, what's going to happen. Grosingers happened to get on first, and in Fort Worth, Texas, where else? But Night of the Hunter was so dear to my heart, and then I submitted it to the Kleban Award, as I was mentioning, and John Kander wrote one of the things, and the other one was written by Dorothy Loudon, who stars on the CD. We were then asked to do a concept CD. Bruce Kimball had a record company then, Varice Saraban, and they paid for 26-piece orchestra and a Broadway cast, and we got a concept CD, which won a bunch of awards.
Wow.
And that got me the Kleban Award, which was for the libretto, the book of the musical.
Yeah.
And that was, Sondheim used to say, the only award that's worth anything is one that comes with money. This one came with $100,000.
Wow.
The money's gone, but
Sure.
the money's gone. I paid my rent.
Sure.
But it was such a major coup to do that, and then it was under option at the Goodman. That's where we were going to do it first. Bob Falls was going to direct it.
The Goodman in
The
Chicago?
Goodman in Chicago. We did workshops there, and Bob Falls said to us at one point, listen, we're going to have to postpone it because I'm going off to direct Aida on Broadway. He went and did Aida, and he had the worst experience of his life, and he said, I'm never doing another musical. And we were canceled.
Oh,
Because
my
he
gosh.
did not enjoy working with Disney. And he never did another musical.
Oh, my
And
gosh.
so we were lucky enough to get it premiered in San Francisco, where it did very, very well.
Wow, what a journey to get there,
It was
huh?
a journey.
How was it received in San Francisco?
Just great. The reviews were wonderful. The kind of reviews that said, it's going to Broadway, and it didn't.
Yeah. Well, why is that? What is the?
It's all about getting that producer and getting that money, and
Right.
and it just didn't roll where it was supposed to roll. But we did it in New York, in the New York Musical Theater Festival, with great people here. Dee Hoty was the mother in it then, and Beth Fowler, the great Beth Fowler from Beauty and the Beast, and it went really well there too. And once again, it just didn't get to step number 2.
Yeah.
And now we're going to bring it back in Texas.
Oh, is that right?
And in fact, yes, my producer there at the Water Tower Theater, who did my show Go in Hollywood 2 years ago, he was in a workshop of the show here in New York with George Lee Andrews and Ron Raines and
Wow.
Beth Fowler, and he's been in love with the show ever since, and now he's an artistic director. And that's how you get your shows on. You have to hope that somebody is going to move on in life and want you.
Wow, so all these years later, because it's been over 20 years
Yeah,
since it premiered at
yeah.
San Francisco, all these years later, now it's going where in Fort Worth, Texas?
Now it'll be in Addison, Texas.
Okay.
Everything's in the Fort Worth, Dallas area
Yeah.
that I've been in.
Right.
But our dream now is to do it slightly differently. We want to do it more environmentally, involve the audience more,
Okay.
because it's an old woman telling a story that happened, and so we're thinking the whole thing is set in a revival tent, and so that the audience is the real audience, listening to this story and being involved in the story.
Oh.
And so we're talking to a very good director now,
Nice.
who is not signed on yet, so we can't talk.
Yeah.
But he is determined, Shane Peterman's my producer, to do the show.
And you said he's an artistic director of a
Of
theater in
a
Texas?
theater called Water Tower Theater, where
Oh,
we
yeah, I know
premiered.
Water
We
Tower.
premiered Go in Hollywood there, and
Wow.
now he's taking it to London.
Oh, very cool.
So this is it is the idea,
Yeah.
and next season, the season after, I have to live longer. But yeah, it is interesting how you do a show and it lies dormant for a while, like a plant, like
Yeah,
an
yeah.
orchid plant, and then suddenly it can bloom again.
Yeah.
And it's a great show, and I love it madly. And Clabe's been gone for 20 years. He never got to see that world premiere.
Oh, wow.
Which is sad on one hand and very interesting when you think about it. But I've been able to do rewrites by using stuff from the trunk that we've written.
Oh, that's nice.
And so things like that. But it was in such good shape before he died that we've been very lucky.
Yeah.
But
Wow.
working with him was a very interesting trip, working with someone so much older, so much more. He used to say he was the last composer to not be influenced by Sondheim, because he came before Sondheim. And he had written in the 60s and in the 50s, and he was more of a Jerome Kern quality to him. It was gorgeous music. I'll get you the CD of Night of the
Yes,
Hunter. You'll
yes.
flip over it.
Yeah.
It's absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah.
And very operatic.
That's interesting. That's
So
super
I
interesting.
think it might
How
be
do
its
you-
time.
How do you? And that's super exciting, and we look forward to updates on that, because that is Night of the Hunter coming to Texas sometime within the next 2 years.
And then hopefully New York.
Yeah, right.
Finally,
of course.
get it back here.
But when you think about, I guess I want to ask about stylistic changes when it comes to something like you mentioned this Night of the Hunter, which is more operatic, versus a lot of your other work, which has been rooted in these Cole Porter isms and musical comedy. I guess what you're thinking about lyrically to adjust depending on style.
Well, content dictates style, as Sondheim always said. Whatever you're writing, you have to be those characters. You have to. The people in Night of the Hunter cannot sing like the people in Going Hollywood. They're just not the same people.
Right.
Somebody who is just, enamored with movies. These are simple Ohio people, the West Virginia. And I had to not write down, because they also have a poetic quality to them. They have poetry in their hearts. And when you're writing lyrics, you're always writing the character and the situation, unless you're doing special material and then you just want to be witty and funny. But every show is different. A Victorian English lady doesn't sound like the preacher in Night of the Hunter. So I've had to being an actor originally, very important.
Yeah.
I get to act those roles. I have to be those roles. I have to know if it sounds right coming out. Even when I wrote Merman's Apprentice, which had Ethel Merman as a leading character, I didn't want her to just sound like she sounded in the shows, because it's a personal story. I wanted to give a little sense that she wasn't as dumb as people make out. She had smarts, because I knew her very, very well.
Right.
I was friends with her.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah. So I got some words in there. She says in one lyric, instead of saying instead of, she says in lieu of. And somebody said to me, well, would she have been so smart? I said, she was.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, and I wanted just a little hint here and there of how down to earth. So same thing with Hunter. No, none of my shows sound like Night of the Hunter.
Yeah.
I mean, the first song the preacher sings, he's a killer. He is a serial killer who kills widows for their money. And we wrote a kind of comedy song for him to start out with called "The Lord Will Provide," but it explains who he is and his mindset. And he's a little crazy, a little obsessive, and it's all the widows that he killed, and he can't remember them. He's got a little book that he goes through. There was one in Sistersville, and so I had to just get in his head.
Yeah.
And it's getting in the head of a killer.
This is a silly, I know,
right? This song for a murderer.
Right? Yeah.
Funny.
Yeah, that is funny. Okay, this is what I was going to ask. I was going to ask, this is a silly question from someone who's never quite written a musical, and we discuss this all the time, is like how you go about, especially in a piece like Night of the Hunter, right? Because it's an adaptation. It's like how you go about coming up with the idea of a song being where, creating a song and putting a song somewhere.
Yeah, it's like consulting the voodoo board.
Yeah.
You outline a show first. You kind of decide what story you're telling, because if this one was based on a novel, novels are fatter than musicals. Musicals can't be just meander along and tell you things, and it's what to leave in, it's what to take out.
Right.
The film does not have one. When I read the novel, I went, oh my God, there's a sequence where they go off to this island across the river and they come back in a terrible storm. And I said, how could they have left that out of the movie? I'm putting it in the musical. Yeah. And of course, it's even harder on the stage, this terrible storm in a boat and sea. But it was all part of what was going on dramatically as well. So I decided that was my end of Act One. I knew where that was. So you construct it. You construct a show like you're building a building. Yeah. And first you do the blueprint, which is an outline, and you probably put where songs might be, and with dummy titles. Right. What's a title? I can't remember for Night of the Hunter how it even happened. It just happened logically. Right. You would write one song that would be in Act Two before you'd ever write Act One. Yeah. Some people go in order. Sondheim always said he went in order. He never wrote out of order. I don't always write in order.
As a writer, well, I tend to, for musicals, it tends to be harder to outline for sure than
it's never for sure. Nothing is in stone. And that's it. I knew, all right, the most important piece that I thought I wanted to write first was, it's called The Wedding Night. And I knew there's a scene where the preacher finally wins these kids' mother. Here's a quick plot is that a husband and wife, they're very, very poor in West Virginia. It's the Depression, and he has no money. And so he decides, I'm going to rob a bank. and he goes off and he robs a bank, and it goes really wrong, and he shoots a guard, and he's arrested, and he is tried for murder, and he is going to be hanged. And while he is in prison, he meets this preacher who's also in for stealing a car, and the preacher finds out that there's $10,000 that he stole that nobody ever recovered. And so when they hang this guy, he goes to find the widow. And he finds the widow who has 2 little children, and he marries her because he knows somehow that money is there. And it's all about the money. And the money is actually hidden in the 5-year-old girl's doll. And she carries it around for the whole story. But he finally, at one point, has to kill the widow. But before he could do that, he has to marry her. And so there was a scene of their wedding night. And their wedding night, I said, that's the most important scene in the show, because he humiliates her in such a terrible fashion, because he's religious, and he's a big, and she thinks she's going to give herself to him, and he doesn't want any of it. And so I said, this is a whole mini opera in itself. And she's standing in front of a mirror at the beginning of the scene, and I wrote this lyric, and it was called "Make Me Be Good. Make me be good enough for him. Make it all work out." And then she sings this prayer, and she walks into the bedroom, and all hell breaks loose. And by the end of the scene, she reprises that song, and it's "Make me be good, make me be pure, make me be good enough for him." And so it's a huge change in character in like 5 minutes. Right. And we did write that. So, and once we wrote that, we knew we were home free.
There is a big thing. There's a big thing with that. I tend to write the opening numbers and go, "Oh yeah, I got it." You know, it depends how quick I can write it. And I go, that is almost, because you're setting it up as a backstory to it. It definitely, and you can speak more on this, does it open you up for more thematicism, right? Because you can throw those themes into foreshadow something.
Oh, absolutely.
With lyric, with music, and ingrain that in people's minds. That's something that movies just literally can't do, as
right.
They don't have the freedom to.
No, and also what we're doing in a musical is music. And music defines the heart of people, the emotions, the scary qualities, things that words alone will not do. And so that's what that scene is. It's a contrast. You know, Jones and Schmidt, who wrote the Fantastics and 110 in the Shade, they like to write 2 songs for a scene. So it would be contrasting. So for example, 110 in the Shade, which is a brilliant piece, they have a song where he sings Melisande, all about who she might be, this wonderful woman. And she says, "No, that's not it. I only want simple little things." And her song is complete contrast to his song. Right. But it's all one scene. And that's what we tried to do with this, except we made it a donut so that she started it and she ended it. But she became a different person in the 5 minutes that we've done, because she starts out being a woman who thinks, "I'll give myself to him and everything will be right." And she becomes a woman that says, "I'll give myself to God and everything will be right." And none of it is ever going to be right.
Definitely what Sondheim said about, and this is a great example of what Sondheim was saying, what content dictates for.
Totally.
Right there, you can give yourself so many options, even with the technicalities, even going into, and now it's like guys in the details, right? Now you go more into the details of going
totally
changing the keys.
And then I invented what she was thinking. All of that said in the novel was she looked in the mirror and she saw her body. And she knew she had to give it to him. That's what the novel said. And I said, well, what would she really be thinking and feeling to get us there? And the music then came in. And his music is so beautiful that it really, yeah, it is in the details, absolutely. And the same thing, and then probably the second song was the preacher song. I knew I had how do I have this preacher sing in a jaunty, fun way about killing widows? And to tell us right up front that this is a thriller. You better be scared of this guy because he is so crazy that he's singing a comedy song about killing widows. He's crazy. And that's
interesting. You're so, yeah, it's ironic.
It's ironic.
Yeah.
It's not just, I'm gonna kill you. No, it's, I killed all these widows, and I can't even remember their names. That's scary.
There's something that's especially
That's scary, and the audience knows more than the characters know.
Well, it's
the
interesting.
characters don't know any of this.
Right. It's interesting because what you're sending a message that is like wholly subtextual, through that
to the audience, and the audience going, no, don't be nice to this guy, don't marry him, and she does everything that you don't want her to do. She does, and there's only one other character in the show who gets how evil this guy is. This is a guy, by the way, who has love tattooed on one hand and hate tattooed on the other. He is always battling that.
Yeah.
And so only the child, little John, who is 11 years old, he sees through him immediately.
Right.
Immediately. And that's why the love and hate comes in.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
We're looking forward to Night of the Hunter regardless, and I'll be interested to see where it goes, and hopefully it comes back here.
Yeah. Or London.
Yeah, right.
It's cheaper to do shows in London.
I was going to say London.
It just
really
is
has
now.
become
Because it's outrageously expensive here.
Right.
It just
right.
is.
Yeah. And London's, I mean, on many different fronts, has become more of the kind of like a by proxy out of town tryout. I want to ask you about the road to Qatar because this is such an absolutely wild experience because it also ties into the show that you're doing now, Camilton, because you wrote the first ever American musical to premiere in the Middle East shortly after 9/11.
Yeah.
Can you tell me how that experience?
Oh my God.
How that came?
Well,
into
I mean,
you?
it's a life-changing experience that has manifested itself into being one musical in the Middle East, The Road to Qatar, Off Broadway, and now Camilton, which is my one-man show about the whole thing.
Right.
It all came about out of the blue. An email showed up, and that's how I start my show. It all began with an email, and it was in a kind of broken English, and it said, "We want you write musical. How much?" And I went, "Oh, sure. Give us your social security number, right?" and that email changed my life because I answered it. And I know somebody who got a similar email in Canada, another musical theater writer, and they just threw it away. They put it into trash. And I answered it because it said, "Call this number in Dubai." I didn't even know where Dubai was. This was 2005. You're right. So a few years after 9/11. And I looked it up and I said, "Wow, Dubai, look at that. It looks like oil wells to me." And so I wrote them back and I said, "You call me." And my phone rang immediately. And I heard a voice. It said, "We want you to write musical. How much?" And I went, "Oh." And they didn't speak much English. So they said, "You write questions, email, we answer." And I called my agent. I was with ICM back then. And he said, "It's a scam. This is ridiculous. Don't be." I said, "Well, just write them anyway. And ask for more money than you ever asked for, ever." And he did. And they said no.
Oh, my God.
But we started to learn what it was about. It was legit. It was a production company in Dubai, and they were going to be doing this big, huge musical to open the Aspire Dome, which was the sports stadium in Doha, Qatar. And so we kept learning more and more things, and we negotiated, and I wanted everything I could possibly get. We went back and said, "Well, if you won't pay us what we ask, what will you pay us?" And they came back with a good number. And so I said, "Let's do it. I won't have to rhyme. It won't be in English." But it was. And then we kept emailing and emailing. They asked me for samples of my work then. I thought I already had the job. I didn't have the job. And I sent them, perversely enough, I sent them songs from Gross Singers, all my Jewish music. Well, it turned out they liked it.
That's funny.
And so, but they would not accept any of the composers that I had worked with. I brought up Matthew Ward. Clay Richardson was already dead, so I couldn't bring him up. But I brought up Jeff Saber, and no.
Why is that?
And they just wanted to control the issue. They were going to tell me who I would write the show with, but they didn't tell me for months. And then one day, I finally got an email, and it said, "You will write show with David Crane." And I knew who he was because he had done 35 Broadway shows as an arranger and an orchestrator, and he had just done the movie of Chicago.
Oh my gosh.
And so I called him up. I was in LA doing my show Saturday night at Grow Singers, and I called him up, and we started to talk, and he didn't believe it would ever happen, but I wanted that money. I wanted this to happen. And so we met in New York, and we turned out we were the same person. It was like looking in a short Jewish mirror. We were the same height. We sat down. We ordered tuna, and we started to talk, and we knew everything, same kind of things, and we were so simpatico, and so we thought, okay, this could happen. Maybe it'll happen. It took another month before they sent us a contract and said, sign it. And it wasn't first class airfare. It was business class. Wow. But I said, let's do it. And I realized then the power of saying yes, the power of yes. And we signed the contract, and 2 days later, we were on a plane going to Dubai.
Well, what did they want the musical to be? I know what the musical is about, and I'll mention that in a moment, but what did they want it to be about?
Well, originally, they wanted it to be about a little boy who went to a sports academy, and his father didn't want him to go. And I thought, well, that's a lousy plot, if ever I heard one. But if you pay me enough, I'll write that. and then they changed their mind, and it became about a sultan's son who's locked in a palace. He gets a lot of gifts, so he gets very, very spoiled, locked in the palace.
Yeah.
And he only wants one thing, a star in the sky. And I thought, okay, that's a little better. And that was the plot they wanted it to be. And they sent me an outline that this is what they wanted. And I thought, okay. And before I signed the contract and got paid the first payment, I wasn't going to write anything. But then once we got to Dubai and we started to find out more, we realized I had to figure this out. I had to find out what it was all about. And they gave us a list of what we called the must-bes. It must be about the desert. It must be about the sea. It must be about pharaonic Egypt. It must be about ancient Greece. It must be about pearl diving in the 20th century. It must be about the Stone Age. It must be about Muhammad Ali. And I went, what? And I'm writing this list down. And
all of these things had to
be in the show. They had to be in the show. And so I thought, okay. And I didn't know how they would be in the show, but I had to figure that out. That was going to be my job.
Wow.
And so it was insane. So once we got past the insanity we were in Dubai for 2 whole days. We went to Qatar for 2 more days where they showed us around Doha, which was, if Dubai is Las Vegas on steroids, then Doha is Palm Springs, where everybody's rich and lives behind walls. And they took us everywhere and showed us everything and tried to educate us about the Middle East, which was not easy. Right. And we had set designers flown in from London, and they expected me to come up with an outline for the show within 4 days.
Wow.
Finish it. I couldn't do it. Right. But I came up with the ideas, and I told them what I thought it should be about, and that it couldn't be about all the things that they wanted it to be, but it could be about 3 of those things. And those 3 things would teach that little sultan's son 3 things about himself, about his mind and his heart and his courage. And my collaborator, David Crane, said, that's the Wizard of Oz. And I said, shut up. And so, but they didn't know that, and we went on. And when we went home, we had 6 weeks to write the musical. We were under a severe deadline, and we finished it in 5 weeks.
Wow!
And I had never written with David Crane before. The first song we ever wrote together was the opening number. And I gave him a lyric that I had in my trunk called "Behind Every Story." And the music was spectacular. And I remember saying to him, this isn't supposed to be good. But it was.
Right.
And we started to write at the top of our form, even though we had no idea if it would be translated, if it wouldn't be translated.
Right.
And I was writing great lyrics that people might never have heard. But we did it, and we finished it. I was still writing Marni Nixon's book at the same time we were doing this.
Gosh.
I finished it in 5 weeks. We rested on the 6th, and then they brought us to London to sing the whole score to them.
To London?
We went to London 2 days after the famous tube and bus bombing. So the story kept getting worse and more crazy as we went on.
Right.
And We went and we sang the songs for them in a piano store. They fired the set designers. They hired an Italian opera director who had never seen a musical. When I mentioned the Fantastics to him, he looked at me like I was crazy. and they hired West End actors. They hired Croatian acrobats, Russian ballet dancers. They hired everybody from around the world. They had camels, they had stallions, they had falcons. It was going to be huge. It was in a stadium. Right. It was like doing a show in a football field.
Right. Oh my gosh.
And after the whole, it was 9 months from when I got the email to when the show was on in November, and they flew us to Qatar to see the show. We weren't any part of the rehearsal period, which was scary because I didn't get to rewrite. Usually when you're in rehearsals, you get to rewrite and tailor it a little bit. Nope. Right. They just did what we wrote. It was on paper. We had a pre-recorded orchestra, the Bratislava Symphony Orchestra, 70 pieces played. We had pre-recorded chorus. We had sets that were unbelievable out of Aida. We had, it was huge. It was huge. When I got there, I couldn't believe it because I couldn't believe how many camels there were. Pooping everywhere.
Oh my gosh.
And so this unbelievable story goes on and on and on. And we come home and we have this incredible story. Right. And people said, you should do the show in New York. I said, there's not enough camels in New York. So we sat down, David and I had the idea to turn the story of what we did into a musical. And I knew by now that big musicals cost too much money. So we decided it can't have 40 people in it. It'll have 5 people in it. And we wrote 2 lead characters were us. The other 3 were all the Middle Easterners and the Italians and his mother and my mother. And we called it The Road to Qatar. And that I called it that because I thought there were all those road pictures Bob Hope and Bing Crosby made. This is the one they never made. And so we wrote it. We did readings. And we wound up premiering in Texas. Where else?
Right. But so the musical that you wrote, that premiered in the Middle East,
that was
wasn't
called
The Road
Aspire.
to
That was called Aspire, named after the Aspire Dome, the Aspire Academy.
I see.
And that was it had nothing to do with it. Only one song, the title song Aspire, wound up in The Road to Qatar. Everything else was a totally brand new, original, insane musical comedy.
That is so. What was the run like in the Middle East in Qatar? Like,
it was supposed to run one night.
Oh,
it was a huge international event where all the ambassadors from all over the world. It was for the opening of the stadium.
Right.
They've done the Asian Games there since then, but the Emir gave it as a gift to the people, and it ran for one whole week. We left after the second night. We went home. So we never saw it again. And it was supposedly videoed by 5 cameras. We've never seen the video. We also weren't paid our final fee, but that's another part of the story. But the story was just unbelievable, and the characters and the people we met.
And it was received well.
It was received very well. You don't get reviewed in Qatar.
Right.
The Emir stood up, and we had a standing emirate ovation. That was all I cared about. You know what I say in my show? I say, I'm looking at them, all these people standing and cheering. And we were on stage at the end because we were in the curtain calls. And I said I could do all my shows on the Baba Ganoush circuit. I really thought I had a new career and that it would all happen in the Middle East. And it didn't. It just didn't. But I thought that's a new career.
Even though they were pleased with it.
They were pleased. But they still didn't pay us. That was the only downside.
Yeah.
But it all went great. I mean, I probably the Emir's son is now the Emir now. I remember seeing it on 2020. Wow. I saw the old Emir, handing it over to the young Emir. But it was so interesting. I never met him. Never met his wife who sat in front of us. Crazy. They sat right in front of me, and I never met them. We were never introduced. Yeah. But I would have loved to have been. That would have been exciting.
Now the show that you're doing now, Campbellton, is The Road to Qatar. Is that
That's
right?
kind of what it is. Yeah. And how that came about was I do these things for Rhodes Scholars.
Okay.
Rhodes Scholars is this big worldwide group, and they come to New York, and I give them a week of theater. They see 3 shows. They go to Sardi's. They get people coming in to speak to them, and one of the speakers is me, and I get to come in and I tell them about writing for the theater. So over the years, over 15 years now, I have developed writing for the theater rather, to be the story of how I did this show. And it became a stand-up routine. And I would get such big laughs, because the story's hilarious, that everyone would say, you should do this as a real show. And I am now. And I came up with the title, which I thought, if we call it Camilton and you say it fast, people might pay $1,000 tickets, right? Camilton, I'm going to see Camilton. And it was just a funny title. And the idea that there were all these camels. And so this is me now making my comeback, as it were, as a performer.
Wow.
It's a return. It's not a comeback.
Yeah, right.
But I've enjoyed it so much, and doing the stand-up end of it. And I sing 5 songs in the show, only one from The Road to Qatar, the title song, and one at the very end we do Aspire, because I have video of the real curtain calls. And so we've got the Bratislava Symphony Orchestra and the chorus and this incredible huge cast, and we have this video. And so that's the end of my Camilton show. I've given it away.
So now, tell us just as a reminder, because I meant to write it down, but it seems I didn't. Tell us about when you're doing it
This week.
I was going to
say. Oh
say.
my God, it's Friday and Saturday. Here's how it really happened. I said, I really want to do this. I really want to do this, and turn it back into a show. And I was in London doing Go in Hollywood with David Crane, my collaborator, and Shane Peterman. And I met a producer there who I was talking to about possibly taking it to Edinburgh, the Edinburgh Fringe Festival, because we did The Road to Qatar there, and it was a great success.
Oh, was it?
And nominated for Best Musical.
Wow.
And they do 100 shows there. And so I thought, I think before I'm too old, I wanted to have the experience of doing a one-man show in that festival. And so this is the tryout. I'm doing my tryout in New York, and I'm hoping what we're going to do is now get it booked, and I will spend a month in Edinburgh. If all goes well, people will come see me, and I'll do it once a day and see how it all goes. It's kind of like testing yourself. Do the thing that scares you the most. Getting out on that stage daily and seeing if I have the stamina to do it, and I will. It's only an hour.
Sure.
And
this episode will probably come out. Will come out after.
So it'll be great. It has gone brilliantly.
Right.
But the thing that we do have. So at the same time as I'm doing this, I sat down. For the last few years, I've been writing the memoir of the whole thing that happened, because here's the story. I wrote a first chapter, and it was all about the opening night of Road to Qatar in Dallas and how I felt. But also, I realized that over the years, as I tell the story, as I write The Road to Qatar with David Crane, and we put ourselves in as characters, if it's funny, it goes in. If it's not funny, it doesn't go in. So your memories, as we were talking about with memoirs, are different than what you put in a show.
Right.
A show is a show. It's entertainment. And the same thing with Camilton. I'm telling only a part of the story and the fun part of it. But I thought, I'm going to sit down and write this book, and I'm going to write the whole story. And the idea of how different it is, what reality is, and what art is. And so Camilton, the book, which just came out and can be ordered online, is the whole story, and it takes it all the way up to getting The Road to Qatar on. Right. So taking real life and turning it into fiction, and then turning it back into fiction again, and turning it back into nonfiction again. It's a little
out of
confusing.
curiosity, where is Camilton this weekend?
Where's
theater?
Where's
Camilton?
Where's it playing in New York? We're doing it in a small space called Polaris North Studio, just down the block on 29th Street.
Oh, is that
in
right?
Chelsea, yes, on a 4th floor, 50 seats. that's all I wanted.
Nice.
I wanted to do in a small venue because it's me doing the story with media behind us.
Yeah.
So that's where we're doing
That's exciting.
And if it goes well, who knows? Maybe it'll run 3 nights.
That's exciting.
Opening night,
though.
closing night. But that's all I really intended to do, just
Yeah.
to try it out in front of.
see how it
It's what
goes.
you do with any musical or any show. You try it out in front of your best friends
Sure.
and see how it goes, and then do it for some more people.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
if I go do it in the festival, it's not going to be my friends anymore.
Yeah,
so,
right.
Making them laugh will be a little harder. but
Right,
it'll
for
be
sure. Well, that's
fun.
exciting. Yeah, I look forward to seeing what
Yes,
happens with
yes.
that. I have to ask you a little bit about this because this was such and I'm like bouncing back and forth between
It's
timelines
great.
here.
Right.
But
I kind of go where
I need to know about Casper, which was a musical that you wrote. It was based on Casper.
Casper the Friendly Ghost.
Right?
Yeah.
And it was starring Chita Rivera.
Yeah, is that unbelievable? I still can't believe it. I still can't believe it. Well, how it started out was it was another musical called Casper that ran in the West End,
was
and
gonna
I
say.
had nothing to do with it.
Okay, yeah. And that was in the 90s.
Exactly, and we went over there, I think in 2000, to do After the Fair, and it was running then, and I was asked by my producer, who had done Dodsworth and Gross Singers, who was now working at the Pittsburgh Civic Light Opera.
Right.
And Van Kaplan. He said, go see the show and meet the director. I went and saw the show. The director was sick, so he wasn't there. I didn't meet the director. I wasn't crazy about the show, but he had the thought, this producer, that I should rewrite it and change it, and so that he could produce it in Pittsburgh the next summer. Oh. And I thought it was a terrible idea. And I said, no, I'm not interested. Well, 6 months go by, and I get a phone call from that producer, and the director's sitting with him, and the director gets on the phone, and he says, oh, I think your score for After the Fair is so beautiful. You're so talented. Will you meet with me? And I said, yes, because he flattered me. And I met with him in Atlanta. He was doing a Christmas Carol. It was Christmas time. And I had already decided I'm not going to rewrite that show. I don't like that show. I didn't like Casper. I thought it was dumb. And so I came up with this. I said, I'll write a whole new musical if you'll let me. And I thought they'll say no and I'll go home. They said yes. And I had 6 months to write a whole new musical using Casper and using his uncles, Stinky Fatso and Stretch, already. And I came up with the notion of what can I do that's sophisticated and funny? I will create a Cruella de Vil-like character and a woman, and I wrote it for Chita Rivera. Never dreaming I'd get Chita Rivera.
Right.
Because I thought, well, someone will play something like Chita Rivera. And I did one of my Drama League benefits, and it was a tribute to Chita Rivera. And her brother sat next to me, who was her manager. And I said, you think she'd ever be interested in doing a show like... And he said, send it over. I sent it over, and we were having a meeting 2 weeks later at her agent's office.
Wow.
And she was available. The money was right. It was a tour of all these huge summer theaters all through the country. And she did it right before she did The Visit at the Goodman.
Oh my
And
gosh.
we did the show. And I talk about tailoring a show. Now I had Chita Rivera, and now I had to change the songs and the dance. She was still dancing really well then.
Right.
She was a youngish woman.
I mean, she was dancing really well up until her dying
I
day, let's be
know,
honest.
But
I mean,
she really,
Yeah.
she could kick those. And she was funny as hell, and she was a dream to work with and would do anything you asked. We changed things. After opening night, I'd come up with a better joke. I'd go into her dressing room, give her the joke, and she would do it that night. new lines.
Wow.
We brought in a different choreographer, new dances. We just kept working on the show.
Right.
She did it that summer, and it was like, and a friendship was made.
and
it
you
was
did
like,
wind up doing it at Pittsburgh
and
CLO.
it opened in Pittsburgh, and then it went to the Fox Theater in Atlanta. It played Dallas Summer Musicals, played all those. They had made deals with all these theaters, and they took the sets, and they took we had a 26-piece orchestra. We had, it was big dance numbers. It was a wonderful show.
Yeah.
You flash forward now, the show without Chita went nowhere, right? It just that was a great experience. It happened. It was over.
Right.
And a theater from Cincinnati calls me up, the Cincinnati Children's Theater, and they want to do a children's theater version of it. And would I rewrite it? And I said yes. And we did it there a few years right before the pandemic. And it was great, even without Chita, because I cut a lot of her little stuff that wasn't there.
Sure.
And it got better reviews. as a children's show, and now we're hoping that it's going to go out to all the children's theaters.
That's great.
That's my
awesome.
dream. But that was right before the pandemic. I'll tell you how I always remember it. They had these big blow-ups of Casper outside the theater, and the minute the pandemic hit, they put a mask on Casper, and that was so poignant but funny at the same time. And so but it was a big hit there, and they had like a 3,000-seat theater filled with kids just loving it.
Oh, that's awesome.
So I loved it.
That's great.
Show. And I'm working with her, led me to write special material for
Everyone
her
always
nightclub
says that
act.
she was
she was a doll.
Oh, you wrote special material for her
I
nightclub
did, yes, which she did in Australia with David Crane. They went and played the Sydney Opera House, and I wrote special material for them. And David had done Spider-Woman with her, so we had that in common even when we first met. I had done Casper. Just being able to say I wrote a show for Chita Rivera is like pretty fantastic.
Yeah, it is. That's pretty amazing. I mean,
Pretty
she's legendary,
amazing.
and she was from what I understood, and I've met her once, but she was the kindest, sweetest person.
Sweetest person, and very, very funny. And in fact, one other story that happened was when David and I had an idea of reuniting her with Dick Van Dyke. Because when she did her show on Broadway, he came and he did some guest shots. And,
that's right.
And they were so good together. And so we thought, we'll do a show with the two of them where they haven't seen each other in 50 years since Bye Bye Birdie. And we wrote an opening number for her. She heard it and screamed with laughter, loved it. She flew David and me out to meet Dick Van Dyke. We went to Malibu, to his house. He just turned 100. He was 88 when we met him. Okay, and I'm singing for Dick Van Dyke with Chita Rivera, like sitting next to me. And David and I sang the song for him. He loved it. He sang along. At 88, he was breakdancing on the floor. I swear to you, he was incredible. And we had a wonderful day with Dick Van Dyke.
Oh my God!
And it all ended with him saying, "I would love to do this, but I can't memorize anymore." And that was the end of the whole show. And we just left it alone. We have the song, and an outline of this incredible show that would have been mixture of video and them live, and it would have been wonderful.
Oh my God, I cannot believe
So
that story.
that story. And I just wrote that up because when he turned 100, I went, "Oh, didn't I meet him? Oh, yes." Wasn't I? And all because of her. All because of Chita. And then I remember that evening being one of my favorite evenings. We went to dinner with her after meeting with Dick. And we're both singing at the dinner table. I go, "I'm singing with Chita Rivera." So much fun. She's always a legend to me. I guess the first time I saw her live on Broadway would have been Chicago. I saw the original Chicago.
Wow.
She was unbelievable.
Yeah,
she was
I'm
unbelievable.
sure.
Always was. I would run into Sheldon Harnick all the time at openings of shows, and he said, "I have to sit down."
Well, Sheldon Harnick, if I'm right, he lived to 99.
Or 99. No, you're absolutely right. 99.
Yeah, 99 years old.
And had all his marbles.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he gosh, talk about another legend. I mean, like,
to have him criticize my work was delightful.
Right.
Because he was so kind.
and it seemed, I mean, I remember Lynn posted something when he passed away, which was he wrote Lynn a rap piece. Do you remember we discussed this? He wrote Lynn a rap piece after seeing In the Heights.
Oh,
that was,
I'll bet he did.
Yeah, that was
because
like,
he could do anything.
yeah, it was like a little parodical, but also it was like meant to, you know, as like a congratulations.
Oh my God!
And Lynn said that he had it framed. As,
oh
you know.
my God!
Yeah.
Sheldon was one of the greats.
Yeah, one of the greats for sure. Where was I gonna go with this? Oh, well, I guess.
Are we back?
Oh yeah, are we back? We're good.
Okay.
Okay, great. You know, where was I? Oh, okay. I want to ask you a little bit more about this this memoir that you wrote about Charles Strouse, even though you ghost wrote it. How that came to you, and also what your relationship was like with Charles Strouse, if you had ever met him before.
Yeah, well, I had met him before then because he ran the ASCAP workshop before Stephen Schwartz did. And so my show After the Fair was in that. And in those days, he was the head of the panel. They would have a panel of people who would come in, celebrities, or writers and things like that. And you couldn't do your whole show. You would do 3 songs for them. And they would critique you. And sometimes they were very inarticulate. Charles was particularly inarticulate. He's a composer. It's interesting. He said, "I don't like your opening number." I go, "Oh, God." And then Lucy Simon, who wrote The Secret Garden, she said, "I liked it." And no one would tell me why.
Yeah.
No one had anything constructive to say. But I sat there and I thought part of this gig is to just take it. What do people say to you?
Yeah.
You know, people do that all the time. They say, I don't like it. Okay, so I wrote a whole new opening number. And it turns out he was right. It wasn't as good. It was better.
Yeah.
So we did that, and that's how I knew him, basically. And then after I wrote Marni's book, my book agent was also his book agent.
Oh.
And so Charles had tried to write the book all by himself.
Okay.
And it seems that the publisher was not happy with that. And so they said, you have to get somebody to come in, a ghostwriter. And so I was brought in by the agent, and we made a little deal. And I had literally, I don't know, maybe 2 months to write this book. And I had to take what he had written, which was stacks of paper that didn't really chronologically make sense. He left out all of his flop musicals, and you know he had 13 flop musicals.
Oh, wow,
13.
I did not
He
know
had
that.
big hits. You know, all
Right.
you need is Annie in your life, or
Right.
Bye Bye Birdie. But he had 13 flops, and I
Bird, It's a Plane, it's
thought
Superman.
anybody reading the book wants to know what happened to these great. The scores are all great.
Yeah.
And so I had to research everything. And working with him was not really working with him. I emailed. We met once in person. It was constant emailing, and then constant research. And me knowing his history as well as I did, the Broadway history, I was able to then put everything into his voice. And I also, one thing I wanted to do was make it a journey for him as a human being from the beginning of the book to the end. And he told me when I met him that he had never visited his parents' graves, and that he never acknowledged their deaths. And I thought, this has to be the end of the book. He's got to acknowledge this. He's got to deal with the parents that were so difficult in his life, but also your parents give you a lot of good things, even if you have problems with them. His mother had some mental difficulties, but she played stride piano. She gave him his music. And I wanted that to be the climax of the book. And so I got it in there. And he went and he visited his parents' graves. And we got into the book, and we got into what was in his mind. And the little boy that he used to be. He had been this fat little boy that he kept with him his whole life, even though he was not a fat man. But it was a fat little boy who always saw himself that way. And so I thought that's part of the book. And that was the thing he liked the best about the book, that I put a character of him as a different child, and who the child we always keep with him. Because Charles himself, I think, never felt he was good enough. He didn't think his music was good enough. He wanted to be a classical composer.
Oh, really?
And all that Broadway stuff, he thought was nothing, but he was good at it.
Yeah.
And he had to come to terms with how good he was, and that nobody else wrote Tomorrow, he wrote Tomorrow. Yeah. and I think he did, and I think that's what the book does in a way, and it exposes his parents and his mother and his relationships. And he's a very complex guy. He just died. I feel like I knew him better than he knew himself by writing the book. But I also wonder if I invented him.
Oh, that's
I
funny.
invented some things, but it's a good book. I'm really proud of it, and I get thanked, in there with his maid or something.
Yeah, I mean, it's true. There were, for every big win, there's 3 or 4 losses. I mean, we recently listened to Bring Back Birdie, and like, that score is actually really fun and great. And there's a lot of good songs there. It's a Bird, It's a Plane, it's Superman. Like,
that's a great score.
Yeah, there's a couple of great scores of his.
Absolutely.
That didn't see the light.
Nick and Nora. To me.
Nick and Nora.
I mean, Nick and Nora was horrible to watch and fabulous to listen to. And I just ran into Richard Maltby Jr., the lyricist, at a party, and I told him all because I loved writing about Nick and Nora.
Right.
I loved writing about their collaboration with Arthur Lawrence, which was very interesting and funny because he was a difficult guy. And so I loved writing about that. So it was fun to talk to somebody else who was in the book that I didn't talk to and who was in the same story.
We did a whole segment. We got to chat with Mark Hobie, and he was in Nick and Nora, and in one of the famous flop musicals at the Marquee. And there's this. I actually should shout them out because I'm doing a show with him at the moment. Patrick Oliver Jones, who did a podcast called Closing Notes. closing night. I don't know if you've ever heard it, but it was a podcast that he did that was a theatrical history podcast where he discussed in season 1, that is, all of the flops that happened at the Marquee Theater.
Oh, wow. That's
and it was fascinating. And he did a whole episode on Nick and Nora, which was
and of course, so did Richard. So did our friend do the whole flop thing. He did.
Yes, that's right. Rob did. Yeah, Rob did as well. Yeah,
and I loved it. And I it's a fascinating show. It was never going to work. And murder mystery musicals are very difficult anyway. Just they don't work. Yeah. But the score is glorious. And I told Richard Maltby, I said, those are your best lyrics. I said, and that includes, Miss Saigon, which he also wrote. But I think they're wonderful.
And I think he's
lyrics.
working on a new. Aren't they working on a new?
Yeah,
cycle?
they're doing another review.
That's like a sequel to Closer Than Ever.
Exactly.
Or something?
Now it'll be about older people. Exactly.
Right. Yeah. I think it premiered at Goodspeed.
Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Very interesting. Yeah.
And so, but I loved writing about that in the book and all the other flops. I mean, a Broadway musical which lasted one night on Broadway, which has really good songs again.
What show is that?
It's called a Broadway musical.
Oh, that's funny.
Already it was a problem, right? We're going to see a Broadway musical. Which Broadway musical? Broadway musical. Well, it's going to last one night.
That's funny.
Yes.
Yeah. How? Yeah. That's so interesting. I will definitely check out the book because I think that's super interesting.
Oh yeah, his life is fascinating. So read Charles.
And it was a beautiful tribute that they did to him at the Tonys this year with Sarah Bareilles singing "Tomorrow." I thought that was a beautiful tribute. And we had spoken to Jess Loprato, who was in the Baba Birdie revival the day that he passed, and we had Jess in to talk about his experience working with Charles, in his later years. But yeah, anyway, fascinating. I want to talk about the book that you came out with last year, which is Mary and Ethel and Mikey Who.
Yes.
And so what's interesting about this book is that when you go and look it up, there was some review somewhere that said. Compared it to The Twilight Zone meets Broadway or something like that. And kinda. I thought that was such an interesting anecdote and I was immediately intrigued after having seen that, but I think it's such an interesting anecdote because it's like this kind of essentially what it's about. I'll set it up and then you'll take it from there. But it's essentially about this boy Mikey who's like this Broadway aficionado, and he just is obsessed with Ethel Merman. And when he finds out that Ethel Merman is passing away from a brain tumor, which actually happened, he winds up going to visit her. And in doing so, winds up getting kind of, to put it lightly, wrapped up in kind of like the space-time continuum that takes him on a journey through back in time from the 30s to present day being the 80s. And it was just like so interesting and light and fun, But I thought what was most interesting is that you wrote this. Oh, and also I should mention too, it delves into the relationship between Ethel Merman and Mary Martin. And all of this to say, what I found most interesting is that in researching you, I realized that you had this relationship with Ethel Merman. Yeah. So I was wondering if you could talk to me a little bit about that and how you even got in contact with her originally. Yeah,
I mean, she's become a big part of my life obsession-wise. I wrote a musical, Merman's Apprentice. I wrote that book. Right. But so I was really young, and it was that little period between when I was an actor and I started to write, and I had nothing going on, and I was obsessed with her. I loved her. I had all these records and I had videos. Yeah. And I thought, I know what I'll do. I'll become a producer. That's easy, right? But I didn't want to produce on stage. I wanted to do TV. And she was doing these symphony concerts, Ethel, which she had done for 10 years of her last years. And she would go out there and sing all of the great songs with symphony orchestras, Boston Pops, all these orchestras. And I went to see her in the Bronx at Lehman College, and she was fabulous, as always. And I looked in the program, and her manager's name was in there with his phone number. And I called him up the next morning. And see how I'm very ballsy. And I called him up and I said, I want to produce Ethel Merman on cable TV. I want that concert to be shot. And he didn't know who the hell I was, right? And first thing he said to me was, well, she doesn't look good on TV. I said, we'll make her look good. And he said, well, okay, next year, 1 year from now, she's going to be playing Carnegie Hall. First time ever. And why don't you bring cameras in there? And I thought, okay. And I got off the phone, and I already had permission now to start to think how to do this. Well, I didn't know what the hell I was doing. I was 21 years old, and I called up some friends who were in TV, who had TV friends, and we had a meeting, and they taught me how to do a budget, how to do a proposal. We thought about where do we want to put this. There was a thing called CBS Cable then, which was a very classy outfit, and they said they have commercials. What if you went in through the back door and got somebody to agree to do the commercials? And I thought Kraft Cheese was sponsoring one of their shows. They had a Kraft music hall, and so I looked up who was the ad agency, and it was a huge ad agency in Chicago. And I sent off a letter to the president, a proposal, a budget, pictures, the whole thing. And one day my phone rang. And it was the president of the company. And he said, we think it's a great idea. Go into the cable company and tell them we'll sponsor it.
Oh, my gosh.
So it was like, oh, my God, my life has changed, right? And so I went into that meeting with these smart other people, older guys, and they were in agreement. And we started to figure out how it was going to happen. We had like 3 months, 4 months now, and we didn't need to raise money because it was going to be sponsored. And after 2 months, the cable company went under.
No way.
They were off the air, and we were left with nothing. Wow. And so I went to HBO, I went to Showtime, I went to all these other places. No one was interested. They couldn't care less. Meanwhile, all during this time, months have gone by, the manager, Bob Gardner, used to come to my apartment and watch my videos. I had a big screen TV, and they were all of Ethel Merman. And he loved them, and we would have a great time. We'd have dinner and wine, and he told her all about me. And so the Carnegie Hall concert comes, and I walk in, and I watch the show, and I'm very depressed because I'm not there with cameras. And I go backstage to meet her. He takes me back, and she immediately says, I'm coming to your house. And 2 days later, she showed up at my apartment.
What?
Yes, with her son, and I made dinner. We showed her videos. She sat there and watched herself on the screen from 50 years prior, and she had the greatest time. And so she started to say, I'm going to bring over some friends next time. She brought over all of her friends, and we had these big parties where we watched video, and she took us out to dinner, and so I became friends with her, and this is the last 2 years of her life, and we became friendly. I went to her apartment. She showed me the ashes of her mother and father and daughter that she kept in a closet, the Christmas tree that was up all year round. So I got to know her really well, and she was funny and earthy and very down to earth. And
that Carnegie Hall. The first time you guys met was at Carnegie Hall.
Yeah,
the first time you guys met.
Yeah.
Wow.
That was it. She had just done this great concert. She won a big award. She was going to be on Johnny Carson the next night. Wow. It was and so she just came to my apartment all the time, and we became good pals. So she dies. And I start to think about stories that she had told me and what things that happened.
Right, I was going to ask you your favorite Ethel Merman story that she told you.
And well, I mean, she didn't talk about her career.
Is that right?
It was just like everyday stuff that happened. And when she had the brain tumor, that was the last. I was with her the night before. And it was a stroke that happened. She had a stroke, and she was about to go out to L.A. to be on the Oscars, to do an Irving Berlin tribute, and she never got there. And I didn't know when I watched the Oscars why she wasn't on and why Bernadette Peters was on instead of her. And I found out she had a stroke. The brain tumor was inoperable, and I went to visit her. A few months later, her son had me come over, and that was the time that she was talking out of the side of her mouth. It was really sad. But I talked to her about a movie she was in. I thought, well, I have to keep her up, keep her spirits up. And I mentioned a movie she did in 1936, and she opened her mouth and she started to sing. And she went, first you get me high, then you get me low.
Oh, my goodness.
And then she went right back to the...
Wow.
And I left her that day, and I realized it's a different part of the brain, the singing. She didn't know she could still do it. She died a few months later, and I kept that story, and part of that was I knew it would get into my novel, Mary and Ethel and Mikey Who, because he goes to see her on that last time, and that's what happens. And it's the last time she ever sang for anybody. And it was for me, and it's for Mikey in the book. And so that's how I got, all these years I knew her.
Wow.
And I sometimes can't believe that happened either. I mean, I once went to her apartment, and it was snowing in winter and awful out, and she opened her apartment door and she saw me. I was covered in snow, and she went, "The snow is snowing, the wind is blowing." And I thought, she's singing to me. It was so exciting.
Oh my goodness. Wow, that's unbelievable. And I just can't fathom it, because we talk, like, similar to how I mentioned about earlier when I mentioned about Sondheim, and how after his passing he just feels like a legend. And I never had the privilege of meeting him, but it feels like he was someone who was so accessible. You don't think about that with Ethel Merman. Ethel Merman feels like even further, obviously.
Well, yeah, she's been dead a long time.
Yeah.
But she was wildly accessible. So her fans know. She would walk down the street with me, and people would go, "Oh, it's Ethel Merman." She'll go, yeah, hi, taxi.
Wow.
She would just not care about those people.
Funny.
But she cared about me as a person. And the first thing I was told was, don't treat her like a star.
Yeah.
And I never did.
Right.
Just like your aunt.
Right.
Aunt Ethel.
Yeah.
But she was, but if I wanted, she would leave me messages on my answering machine, which I kept.
Oh, did you?
Thank goodness for answering machines. I kept the messages. Yeah.
Oh,
and
that's
she
special.
was funny. She was just, she was a woman from Queens. She talked like this. And she was so loud that I had an apartment that was like very long in Chelsea. You could hear her in the back room, when she was just whispering.
This is a silly question that I have about Ethel Merman. Everyone commented on exactly how loud she was.
Yeah.
But did she realize that was that more of a subconscious thing?
It was her voice.
Right.
It was a special voice. Mary Martin always said she was a tenor because she had that thing that just went out there like that. And so anytime she talked, it was up here. And so it was right there. And the diction was very, very good.
Wow. Oh,
so
my goodness.
I think about her when I sing sometimes. Got to get it out there. And also when she started in the theater in 1930, there were no microphones.
Yeah.
So she had to get it into that last row of the Alvin Theater.
Right.
And nobody sounded like that then. All women in musicals were sopranos because that's how the voice got out there. But she had that tenor voice,
which
that
made
got
her
out
incredibly
there.
unique.
It was unique.
It still is pretty
It's still unique. Other women emulate her.
Yeah.
But now with microphones, it's not the same thing.
Yeah.
And she, she used mics at the end there. She, certainly when she was with a 70-piece symphony orchestra, she had her own special mics she traveled with that, were right here. Mm-hmm. And so she was no fool.
Yeah.
You're not going to break your voice.
Yeah.
But on stage, the last real big musical she did was Hello, Dolly, which I was lucky enough to see.
Wow.
And there were only foot mics. They had mics on the foot.
Oh my
That
goodness.
was it. People were not mic'd at
What?
all. So you heard people. You wonder why in the old days people used to sing straight out. The mic was down there. The people were out there. You couldn't turn your head this way because they wouldn't hear you.
Right.
That's why.
Right.
That was the different style of
gosh.
acting.
And to this point, too, in regards to the book, you also had a couple of occasions where I believe you met or spoke with Mary Martin as well.
Oh,
right?
yeah. And that was because of the same thing, because Bob, who was Ethel's manager, he loved Mary better than Ethel. It's funny. He worked for Ethel, but he loved Mary. And so he introduced me. And he was trying to get her to do the same thing, to do symphony concerts all over. And Mary outpriced herself. But I got to meet her and had some lovely conversations and then got to know her. We wrote letters. She lived in Palm Springs. And she sometimes, once in a while, we spoke on the phone. But she was a completely different personality. She was more reserved. She was from Texas. She was an interesting woman, but she was not just that ballsy woman at all. But she was a big star.
Right, and strangely opposites attract in that way.
Yeah, and I saw the two of them appear on the same stage at the Broadway Theater, and that was quite amazing. But I knew Mary, but just not as well.
Did you ever meet her like in person?
Oh yeah,
Yeah, you did.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. That's such a it really is. It's almost removed in my brain.
It's very bizarre. And I look back, actually, the first time I met Mary, I was a fan. And I went to see, she did a play on Broadway called Do You Turn Somersaults? Very obscure. And it was a straight play, 2-character play. And it was a bomb at the 46th Street, which is, where the Richard Rogers Theater. Why would you put a play in there, first of all? And it was a snowy, horrible night when the show closed, and I went to the closing, and she invited all of her fans on stage, and there were only about 10 of us, and she signed everything that we had. She autographed, she talked to us. She was so delightful, and it was her closing night. That was very sad, but it was fantastic. She was delightful.
Wow.
I remember I had brought a stack of things for her to sign, and when she finally finished, I said, well, Mary, I'm going to go home. And she said, go home, Steve.
Oh my gosh.
She was sick of signing.
Have you felt the reception from the book? Have you felt it to be positive? Have you felt the people who? I mean, are there a lot of people who knew Ethel and Mary who've read the book?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think there are people who wish they did also. I think the book has done very well for that because it takes you back. It is I call it a historical novel because everything that's in the past really happened, except Mikey wasn't there.
And that I appreciated. I appreciated that there would be moments where, like, for a great example is when you mentioned the fact that he goes to bring her flowers, but in fact Ethel was allergic to flowers, and so
that was true.
And I had wondered that. I was like, is this? So then I stopped reading and I went and I looked it up, and I was like, oh well, no, this is accurate and this is accurate. Even the brain tumor at first, I was like, did she really pass away that way? Oh yeah. The apartment.
And I did bring her flowers that day, and I did say, should I have done that? And that's when she said, no more singing, doesn't matter. The allergy didn't matter anymore. But the stuff like in the real past, going to the Rainbow Room where Mary Martin did sing, and then when Mary Martin took over for the national tour of Annie Get Your Gun, there's a whole scene where Ethel goes to see her at a run through of the show. That was all true.
Oh, really?
So that's true, and the whole stuff with when they were on TV together doing and I remember. Because Ethel would say, when they would sing together, I have to be on the left. And Mary said, she thinks I don't know that that's the star spot. I don't care. So that was just the way they were together.
Yeah, their banter. It's funny, too, is like, how did you know that? Like, how did you know about the story about the run-through or things like that?
Good question. I read every book about everything and just kind of absorbed it all. Yeah.
Right.
I mean, I read a book about when Mary Martin's husband was sent away to a hospital for alcoholism and drugs. And when I read all about that, I said, I have to use that in the book. I have to use that as fictionalize it. But the idea, because her husband, she was married to Richard Halliday, who was her manager and her producer, and they had what they call a marriage blanc. So she was gay, he was gay, it didn't matter. They had a child together, though, and they had a very good marriage that it was odd to some people. And he had some drinking problems towards the end, which is why she moved to Brazil. So I put all of that, I wanted to put all that in there. Things that I had read in like 20 different books. And stuff that I knew that Ethel told me, that she told me. I left out a few good stories, but that's all right.
But that's certainly interesting. And what's interesting about it is being able to take those historical instances and then apply fiction to them.
That's the most fun. I did the same thing in the musical Merman's Apprentice.
I
said, okay, this is about Ethel Merman at the time she did Hello, Dolly in 1970, and what if I put this little girl, into her life, and what would she learn from it? And that's what I did.
I want to ask you about what's next for you, and mention a little bit about Going Hollywood, which you just had in 2023, which we're in Texas as well, right?
Yeah, that started in Texas, and we just did a workshop in London in September, which went really well with West End people.
Nice.
And now the producer's going over there this month, as a matter of fact, to talk to regionals in London about co-producing and getting to the West End is our goal. And with that show, it's a great show. It's a big show, though. That's one I can't reduce to 5 characters.
What is it about?
It's yet another time travel piece. I love time travel, and it's about these two. It's a total original. 2 writers who, a man and a woman, who have a relationship, but it's an up and down relationship. But they are love each other as writers. They are Comden and Green. Think about them as
Sure.
Comden and Green. And they meet for her 30th birthday at a restaurant in Grand Central Station called the Super Chief Dining Car. And it's a complete recreation of the train that used to go out to Hollywood. And they're very upset because the Broadway show that they think they're going to get on is not going to get on. 33 of the 34 producers have backed out. And now she says, oh, if only we could be in the past and go to Hollywood and write movie musicals at MGM. And she blows on the candles and the train starts moving across the tracks back to Hollywood to 1949. And they get a job at MGM writing movie musicals. But what they don't realize is that they are in the middle of the blacklist period when all the bad stuff was going on with the Hollywood 10. And so Hollywood is about to crumble. So they get to stay for one whole year, write a movie musical, have it produced with Ann Miller starring in it.
Oh, that's cool.
And they have to come back to their real time. They learn the lesson that we all learn from time travel, which is every time is just as bad as every other time.
Sure.
And you should live in your own life.
Yeah.
And so that's the story of Going Hollywood.
Oh, that's interesting.
And it's a really good show.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you about. Okay, we talked about. What's next for you? So we talked about Night of the Hunter. We talked about Going to Hollywood, and I wanted to, if you, and Hamilton, of course. You got a lot of coming down the pipeline. But let me know if there's anything else that I missed, or anything else that you're like, that you want to.
Well, what's coming? I Going Hollywood has really been the obsession for a while, and so still moving there. We did rewrites after we did the workshop. Of course, you're always doing that. And
who are you writing that with again?
That's David Crane.
That is David Crane.
David Crane, who I never would have met if we didn't go to the Middle East.
Yeah, how funny.
So I am so lucky. We don't know, what the next show will be if we're gonna write another show. So the other collaborator I have is David Evans, who I wrote Merman's Apprentice with, and we're still always trying to get that on again with Clea Blackhurst, the great Clea Blackhurst. I want to get it on in New York. But we wrote another show that only has 3 characters, and it's based on a short story I wrote, which is also based on my life. A lot of things becomes based on my life. And it's about the nature of lies and liars, which I think is very, very pertinent for today. And it's called Ain't It the Truth? And it's only got 3 actors, but they play a lot of parts. And it's about 2 people in my life. One person who I thought I could trust with anything and who turned out to be the biggest, craziest liar ever and almost put my whole career under. And another woman who I knew in a different period who seemed like she was always lying about everything because she knew everybody in show business. And it turned out when she died, everybody in show business turned up at her funeral.
Wow.
And so she wasn't lying about anything.
Wow.
And so I thought these 2 stories put together in different time frames with the one person in the middle of the whole thing would be an interesting show. And it was an interesting short story. And so we're doing a reading of that in Fort Worth, Texas.
Nice.
in May. And we'll see what we got.
That's exciting.
Because I wrote it as a show, then I rewrote it as a movie because I thought, a movie musical would be much better. We only need to find a few $1 million, ha ha ha. And so now we're doing it on the stage again.
Oh, that's exciting.
So
that's nice.
That's happening.
And then I wanted to ask you a little bit about, a state of the industry question and what you've seen lately that you've really enjoyed and what you're looking forward to that's coming that you're really enjoying.
Yeah. I mean, my favorite musical right now on Broadway is maybe Happy Ending.
Oh, yeah?
It is. In fact, it feels to me, and I will make a big statement, like the best musical of this century.
Wow.
I have had a hard time with 21st century musicals.
Is that right?
I like some, I don't like some, I hate some, but I hadn't seen anything that knocked my socks off the way maybe Happy Ending did. Wow. It's so original. The staging is unbelievable. The sets are unbelievable.
Yeah.
And Darren Criss is unbelievable.
Yeah.
And so is she. But when I first saw it 5 times. And I never see a show 5 times.
Wow.
But I was lucky to see it 5 times for free, no less, because I would take my groups to see it. And it's so discussable because to me it's a show that is so about human the human condition, and especially how we all have a shelf life, and how older people take to it a lot. Young people love the story. It's a great story, but older people go, oh yeah, I can't find that replacement part anymore. It's not working the same way. The story that you think is just about robots really isn't. And I think it's so beautifully crafted, and the music and lyrics are impeccable and beautifully directed and beautifully staged. So that's my favorite thing at the moment of that kind of show.
Nice, yeah.
As I said, and I just I'm knocked out by it, and I want to work with that director,
Michael Arden. Oh yeah.
I want to work with him.
He sure is
I
brilliant.
really do, and I don't know what it'll be, but something.
And he's working on a new
gonna
piece
happen.
right now too. The
Lost Boys, which is a little scary because there has never been a successful musical with vampires.
Yeah, right.
So we'll see if he breaks that mold. That's a tough one.
Yeah.
It's tough for a lot of great people who work. I mean, he just had a big flop too.
Yeah.
With Steven Schwartz, who was like the most successful, and all these people, you never know. You just never know anything about anything.
Yeah.
What's going to be
Have
successful.
you gotten to see Ragtime yet?
I haven't. I loved it.
Oh, man.
And I saw the original.
Yeah.
And I love this production. I got to sit upstairs, which I usually hate to at Lincoln Center, but because it's this big, empty, vast stage, not a lot of sets.
Right.
It works. It's beautiful to watch from.
I was going to say we sat up there too and we saw it. It's just
beautiful to watch from that distance, and it's not. It's not the kind of show you have to sit on top of people.
Yeah.
It's about big subject and big characters. So I loved it.
Yeah, me too.
I did love it.
Me too.
And the first time I saw it was in L.A. when it was at the old Schubert they tore down.
Oh, wow.
The touring production originally. Wow. So it's a great show.
Sure.
So those are my two favorite musicals right now that are playing.
Yeah.
I'll never talk. I'll be like Sondheim. We'll never talk about the things we don't like.
Yeah, me neither. I don't do
with live people. Well, nobody likes everything. I'm a big proponent of well-crafted scores and lyrics and music not that memorable is a bad word, because nothing is memorable when you go to the theater. But it has to touch your soul, and music to me, theater music is so unique, and theater music is more than pop music, and it's more than jazz. It's more than all of the elements that you put into the theater music, because it's got to play against the lyrics at the same time as it's playing with the lyrics.
Oh, that's interesting.
I think sometimes a lyric can say, "I hate you," and the music may be so romantic that you know that person's lying.
Right.
And I love that. And that's how I try to write as well. So that it's not just about tunes. Yeah. It's about getting into the heart of the characters.
Right.
So
right.
That's what I love.
Yeah, I love that. We do a tradition on this podcast where we manifest a dream guest for us to have in this chair. So we want you to manifest whoever you'd like. We've been able, luckily, we've been able to have some dream guests like Jerry Zaks and Mary Testa that we talked about. Yeah. Here and
you mean to have the drink?
Yeah, to have us to have as a podcast guest sitting in this chair.
Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy.
It could be anyone living.
Well, if it was for Broadway, it's like get Darren Criss. You haven't had him yet. Get Darren Criss.
Yeah, great.
Because he is so unique in this role. Yeah. I got to see his replacement. The guy who went
on. Feldman,
yeah, and he was great. I had seen him in a play, and I thought he was great.
And
MTC
Stage 2.
Yes, exactly. And he was great with Joanna Gleason.
Yeah,
and
I wish I'd seen that.
He was delightful, and she's always fabulous. Yeah, get her. She's another one.
Yeah, Joanna Gleason.
Get her talk about Into the Woods. I mean, I have to say, when I saw her in Into the Woods, I mean, she was just knocked your socks off.
Right.
She was so amazing. No one ever playing that role was better, ever, or gets what out of those lines. But Darren Criss, I think would be wonderful. But I said I saw Andrew Barth, and he was good.
Yeah.
But then when I went back again, I went, oh no, that's the guy. He created that role. He created everything physically about him. Everything is so right, and he deserved that Tony. I knew he would get it. So that's a good one.
I love that.
Or the ghost of Ethel Merman. Get her.
I'll take it. And we started the podcast by asking you who was your I want to be like you when you were a kid. And we want to end the podcast by asking you who's your I want to be like you now.
Oh, boy. Let's see. still probably the same. You know,
Yeah.
it's still those kind of people. Noel Coward, Cole Porter. It's all the dead people I still want to be like. I want to have those careers.
Right.
And I know it's almost impossible now, but I've had 15 of my musicals produced, which is insane.
Yeah.
But I want to have the kind of careers. All right, so John Kander. I want to live that long and write that well and keep going and have a life where I saw John Kander just maybe 2 years ago, getting out of a taxi, running to the box office for a theater, and he was 96 years old. And I went, that's who I want to be when I grow up.
I love
running
that.
to the
I
box
love
office.
I love that. I almost forgot one thing. We can't end the podcast quite yet because I just realized that I had prepped this thing, and I think you'll really get a kick out of it. I want to do a little Broadway trivia with you.
Okay, good.
And this is going to be specifically, I'm keeping it toward a golden age era.
Yeah. That's
so
smart.
I'm gonna throw some stuff out, and I almost forgot about it. So I want to make sure that before we end the podcast,
Yes.
I do this first. So I'll throw out a couple questions for you, and you'll see. Okay, which musical from the 1940s was the first to win the Pulitzer Prize for drama? Is it, unless you know it, I could give you multiple choice, unless you already know it.
Well, from the 40s or from the 30s?
From the 40s.
So you're saying, but one did win in the 30s.
Yes, but
Yes,
this
okay.
was the first
In
one
the
from
40s.
the 40s
Okay.
to win the Pulitzer Prize for drama. Do you want me to give you the options?
Oklahoma.
See, that was the trick question.
Because it's a special award.
Exactly.
Yes. Okay.
It's
a trick question.
It's a trick question. The actual answer is South Pacific because
You're
South
correct,
Pacific
'cause
won the
that's
drama
end.
award.
That's
Yes.
correct.
Okay, I'll give you another. Who was originally supposed to play the lead in My Fair Lady before Rex Harrison was cast? Is it A, Laurence Olivier, B, Noel Coward, C, Michael Redgrave, or D, Alfred Lunt?
Well, it would have been Noel Coward.
Yes, that's correct.
He
That's
didn't,
right.
He didn't want to do it.
That's
He was
right.
also offered The King and I.
Yeah. Oh wow. Oh wow. That's funny. Okay. In which year did Ethel Merman first star in Annie Get Your Gun?
Oh, wow. 1946. How hard.
Okay. Which of these shows did not have its original Broadway production choreographed by Agnes DeMille? Is it A, Oklahoma, B, Carousel, C, Brigadoon, or D, Paint Your Wagon?
Oh, so that's a real trick question. They all were Agnes DeMille.
That actually, it says that Paint Your Wagon was Michael Kidd.
No, that's wrong.
That's wrong.
No,
Oh,
it's
wow.
Agnes DeMille.
Wow.
Absolutely,
Okay, there you go.
Agnes.
Interesting.
All of them. No. She did a lot.
Yeah, she sure did.
She really
and she
did.
revolutionized things.
And she did Gentlemen for Blondes, which always knocks me out because I think
Right.
that had a lot of tap in it.
Yeah.
She could do anything.
Yeah. Did you look that up, Chris?
I'm doing it right now.
Yeah, look, I'm right. That one I'm right about.
That's
Oh,
funny.
yes.
He is, Chris?
Yeah, it is.
Wow, look at that. Okay, there was an error here. Okay.
I trust him more than
Yeah, I know. Which musical holds the record for the longest running show on Broadway that opened during the 1950s? Okay, so your options are A, The King and I, B, My Fair Lady, C, Damn Yankees, or D, Bells Are Ringing.
Well, it's My Fair Lady.
Yeah, that's right. My Fair Lady.
My Fair Lady held the record for a long time.
Oh, is that
as
right?
the longest running show. Yeah, I think My Fair Lady was beat by Hello Dolly. And then 3 months later, Fiddler on the Roof.
Wow.
And then Chorus Line happened.
Yeah,
and,
My Fair Lady
and then all
ran-
bets are off with Phantom.
It's funny because many people
Yeah.
think that it's King and I.
Right.
And if you look it up,
No.
sometimes you'll get a different answer.
Right.
But it's actually My Fair Lady, which ran 2,717 performances.
Yeah.
That's
And
a long
that,
run.
yeah, and now we look at that, something that ran 6 years, and you go, oh, Phantom ran 35 years.
Yeah,
It's like
yeah.
insane.
Yeah, and it's funny too because even if you think about the revival of My Fair Lady, that also, especially for a Lincoln Center show, ran a long time
Oh,
too.
yeah.
And I thought that was a beautiful revival too.
Yeah.
Next question. In the original 1959 production of Gypsy, who was the credited director? A, Jerome Robbins, B, George Abbott, C, Harold Clurman, or D, David Merrick?
Robbins.
Jerome Robbins.
Robbins.
Yeah, most people think he's the choreographer.
He
of
did
Gypsy.
both. He always did both.
Yes.
Well, not always.
Not in, West
early,
Side
he was
Story.
only. Yeah, West Side, he's, of course, both. And it's interesting because Gerald Friedman, here's a little something, was his assistant director. And on both West Side and Gypsy. And I met with him because I thought, let's write a book about what you did. He said, I did everything. He said, I did all the scenes. He did everything. Robbins didn't like to talk to actors so much.
Oh, interesting.
He wasn't comfortable with actors.
Yeah.
With Ethel, he was. And they were dear friends towards the end.
Oh, really?
Ethel would say, I'm going to see Jerry and his boyfriend tomorrow. And I go, Jerry? Who's Jerry? Jerry Robbins.
Wow.
I was like knocked out when she
That's
talked
funny.
about people like that.
That's funny. All right, your next question. Which of these Broadway shows did not open in 1959? Okay. A, Gypsy. B, Mattress. C, Forum. Or D, Redhead? Forum. That is correct.
62.
62. Yeah, look at that. Oh, my
yes.
goodness. You should write one of these Broadway
Yes.
trivia books. Okay. And I think I had, was there one more or two more? Oh, two more. Okay. What show was Rodgers and Hammerstein's successor to 1943's Oklahoma? Is it A, Allegro, B, Pipe Dream, C, Carousel, or D, South Pacific?
Carousel.
That's 1945. And lastly, who won the Tony for Best Actress in a Musical in 1950? Was it A, Mary Martin, South Pacific, B, Ethel Merman for Call Me Madam, C, Rosalind Russell for Wonderful Town, or D, Julie Andrews for My Fair Lady?
So you're talking about 1950.
That's right.
Okay. So it would have been Ethel and Call Me Madam. Or she
Strangely
51.
Strangely enough, I thought I had written the answer here, and I didn't write it down.
Oh, now we have to look it up.
You
Well,
have to
because
look it
that's hard, the actual year. Because Mary Martin did win
I
for
believe
South
it's
Pacific.
Mary Martin.
She won for South Pacific, but that was 49, I think.
Oh, interesting. I believe it's
Yeah,
Mary
it
Martin.
might be because the next year would have been 50,
Tonys,
and
yes.
then Ethel was Call
It
Me
might have been
Madam
a fall
the year
premiere.
after that.
Yeah.
Right.
Check-
That's
look
Ethel's
it up.
only Tony for Mary won.
It is
Yeah,
Mary Martin. Okay, that's what I thought.
She won 4. She won South Pacific, Peter Pan, Sound of Music, and I forgot the fourth one.
Wow, I did not know that.
Yeah.
Well, there it is. That was Broadway trivia. You got pretty much
okay.
everyone right, I believe.
All right,
yeah.
good,
and
good.
I want to say, get Mary and Ethel and Mikey Who and Camilton, which you're
Yes.
doing this weekend, and hopefully has a future life, and all of the shows that you have coming up. This is super exciting, and thank you for being here.
Oh, thank
We really
you. This was a
appreciate it.
blast.
Yeah.
You guys are so smart.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much.
That's unique in itself.
Oh, thank you. Thank
This
you
was
so much,
great.
Stephen
Lots of fun.
Cole.
Thank you.
Sweet. I Want to Be Like You with Elbi Cespedes is produced by Elbi and Christian Cespedes. Special thanks to Angelina Cespedes, Vincenzo Salvatore Cakes, and of course, Stephen Cole.